What's the cringiest thing you've seen a bride and groom do for their wedding? You know those slightly off looking Mickey and Minnie Mouse you see in New York City? Yeah. They showed up for the first dance because the bride loved Disney. The entire room was forced to watch bride and groom dance alongside a deformed Mickey and Minnie. And halfway through they switched, so the bride was dancing with Mickey and the groom with Minnie. I've never seen such a strange combination of stifled laughter and horrified stares. Dated a girl in my 20s and went to her friend's wedding in upstate New York. In the middle of the service the minister's cell phone rang. He answered. It was God. God wanted to talk to the groom. Conversation lasted a couple minutes. Then the ceremony continued. Did everyone laugh, or was it meant to be serious? I mean, if it wasn't a joke and was an actual call from God, I think it would have been pretty big news. When I was 11 my cousin got married for the third time. I never really liked her because A, she was 37 when I was 11. We didn't have a lot in common and B, she was pretty full of herself. The wedding itself was fine. Pretty boring but fine. Then we get to the reception. We were told we had to sit down as soon as we got there. Some people found it weird, but I've only been to one other wedding before this. Her other marriages were when I was little. No kids were allowed at her weddings, so I didn't think anything of it. The bride and groom then make a huge dramatic entrance and everyone awkwardly clapped for them as they strutted around the room with actual crowns on their heads. The bride then gets the microphone and hands it to her mom and asks her to say something she loves about the bride. She then tells her mom to pass it on and says she wants everyone in the room to say one thing they absolutely love about the bride. Not the bride and groom, not their relationship, just the bride herself. It was super awkward. The minister, or pastor, used to date the bride and gushed about how wonderful she was. Told the groom if he ever died not to worry, he'd take care of her. I was shell-shocked. I so wished I could think of a reason to ask the couple for a copy of the video of their wedding, but couldn't quite find a legit one. So let's see. Groom changed who his best man was and didn't tell the original BM until the start of the ceremony. Bride and groom asked a guest to bartend the reception. At the reception groom dirty danced with his stepmom. Full hands on ass. Bride and groom hold their wedding party up to do a choreographed dance to Meatloaf's Paradise by the dashboard lights, but didn't give them any pre-warning or teach them the dance. That song is 5 minutes long. Wedding was at a scenic boarding school campus during the summer. Guests were told dormitories were complimentary to stay in. Guests were not told there would be no bedding provided or account in the building. Groom later reviled everyone who stayed in a dorm asking for money. Same bride and groom chose another friend's wedding reception as the right setting to yell at a third pair of mutual friends for not including them in their wedding party. This was Marizo, the bride's family. One of my first classmates to get married, we were 19, had a small reception. Mostly family and friends from high school, nothing wrong with that. They decided to auction off the garter belt, and whoever won took it off the bride. Most of us were poor college students, so the only people bidding were her dad and uncles. It was super uncomfortable. Giving horrible vows and speeches. A part of my family has the habit to use any family gathering as a moment to remember loved ones who died. That's not a comfortable habit for me, but to each his own. However, it becomes very weird when wedding speeches and even vows start to include great uncles who died more than a year ago, and the only people who actually knew him are my grandparents. Yes, the vows, and not even in an interesting way, but just if only Uncle Barney could have still been alive while we are getting married. To be honest, our entire family is horrible at giving speeches. There's 2 brothers, one of whom is my dad, and 2 sisters. My parents can only make joke speeches. The uncle and his family make dry lists of things they do. For example, his wedding speech for his son was a 10-minute monologue about renovating the couple's kitchen. One aunt can only boast about achievements their family members have gained. If there's no achievements, there's no speeches. The fourth is the one with the death speeches. It's a tie between my sister breaking her knee, seriously, at her own wedding dancing to the Cotton Eye Joe and my stepsister having her reception at an honest to God truck stop while 6 months pregnant. In her defense, the food was good, but wow was it weird walking through a gas station in formal wear. At the beginning of the reception, we all had to stand up and sing the national anthem. To be clear, this was in another country I'd never been to a wedding in before. So I thought, okay, maybe this is just a tradition I've never heard of before here. Then I told this to other people, and they were all like, no, that's just really weird. Also, at that wedding the father of the groom ended his speech with what I'm sure he thought was an amazing joke on how it's easier to build a bridge to Hawaii than to understand what a woman is thinking. It would have been awkward enough had the man not also been standing between his ex and current wife as he was delivering it. I wasn't a guest. I was working the wedding. The bride got drunk and sat on some other dude's lap for 2 hours and flirted with him while the groom sat by himself at the head table with a defeated look on his face. This might be the most depressing one yet. Not wedding but engagement ceremony. They reenacted a scene from an old romantic film about two lovers in 1800s in front of like 300 people. They sang their vows to each other. Neither had a singing voice. Vows were generally batshit crazy, like submissive in the bedroom and not asking about where she was going. The auto-tune microphones were a terrible idea. Their vow songs shared a chorus, and it was awful, and they expected the guests to sing along with the chorus. The vows singing lasted 20 minutes. Pure cringe. Bride entered to Brotherhood soundtrack blasting on boombox. Civil service that lasted a few minutes starting at around 1 PM. She leaves to same blasting Brotherhood soundtrack. The mother announces that the reception starts at 5:30 PM. There is no food and no bar, but trays of dessert bars will be served. We are also told the venue is locked until then, so there is no place to wait. My girlfriend and I leave with a crowd of people to across the street to an Irish pub for drinks. A bit of a party breaks out there. We all get told to knock it off and come wait back at the venue in the hall. So we sit in the hall on the carpet for a few hours without drinks or dinner. Bride and groom arrive and enter the venue to an honor guard of floor hockey players wearing hockey jerseys and holding sticks above their heads like swords at a royal wedding. More Brotherhood music, of course. Place emptied out pretty quick as people either left to go back to the pub or to the fast food place a bit further away. Our dinner was lemon squares and a can of Coke from a vending machine in the lobby. Funny stuff. Not the couple. The pastor kept saying our Heavenly Father, Daddy God, while marrying them. Oh, I have 2 exclamation point. 1 point. The bride decided to sing as she walked down the aisle. She was not a particularly talented singer, and she was singing over a Carrie Underwood song, so we could all hear the original vocal track. She finished walking about halfway through the song and then stood there and sang the rest of the song at the groom, and all we could do was sit there and watch. 2. Different wedding. They began the wedding with the groom playing an out of tune guitar and singing to the bride. They were sitting on chairs in front of everyone. Legit 400 people. And the bride was clearly uncomfortable, which made everyone else uncomfortable. That wedding also included a foot washing ceremony, and when the bride put her shoes back on she tripped on her dress and fell flat on her face. They hadn't done the vows yet and the ceremony stopped for 20 minutes to deal with the nosebleed she gave herself. Not the bride and groom, but the bride's father. I was the best man. They married young after she fell pregnant. It wasn't planned, but they clearly loved each other, and it was the right thing for them to do in their eyes, both Christian. Anyway, come the wedding day and sat next to the bride's father at the reception, and I can see Hez looking at his prepared speech repeatedly. I can see phrases like not ideal, would preferred not to welcome you into the family in these circumstances, etc. Just before the groom gets up to give a speech, the bride's father excuses himself to nip to the loo, leaving his speech behind. Him not ashamed to say I swiped it, and then pleaded ignorance when he returned. In the end he stood up and muttered a few words about love and then sat down. I never told the groom, and I'm happy to say they're still happily married 20 years later. invite all their Facebook friends, and expect 700 people, and like less than 100 show up. I knew a couple who didn't specifically invite anyone. Just made like a public event on FB or somehow assumed people would know when/where it was and show up. They were confused and offended when almost nobody came. At my cousin's wedding, they did the thing where the groom removes the bride's garter and tosses it to all the single guys. I guess none of the guys wanted to be next to be married, because once the groom tossed the garter, no one grabbed it. It just landed on the ground a few feet in front of a crowd of motionless guys. The groom tossed the garter 3 times before one guy half-heartedly picked it off the ground. The bride wouldn't look at any of those guys for the rest of the night. Not the bride and groom, but my husband's cousin has a signature wedding move. About halfway through the reception he takes over the band/DJ mic and sings this rockin' 60s pop song. I forget which one, but you'd know it. He really plays it up, belts it out. It's his moment in the spotlight and everyone loves it. Except in my husband's family there's like 60 cousins, so I've seen this move in dozens of weddings over the years. The first time it felt spontaneous and fun, but now I cringe as he heads up for the mic yet again. Okay, so as soon as the bride and groom got out of church everyone went to congratulate them and give gifts, which usually are flowers/alcohol plus envelopes. The bride had a pen and notebook and she signed each envelope, or wrote in notebook, if someone didn't give her envelope. Later as we went to the restaurant, where the party was about to start, we waited for 2 hours for the pair. Turns out they made a stop during their ride to count money. As they finally got to the party they started complaining that they didn't make enough to pay for the party expenses and earn more. They only spent time only with the rich part of family. The poor tables didn't get the good cake/food. There was literally different food on some tables. I sat near our poor part of family. No meat or cakes made it to the table. Me and like 7 other people didn't get forks. Only spoons. Why would you give fork to someone when there's only soup for them to eat, right? Now, mind you, I gave them enough to pay for like 5 plates/people and I helped them during preparations. I even baked a few cakes that I didn't get to eat in the end. Half of people got out after like 20 minutes. Bride called them all terrible for ruining her dream wedding. Worst wedding ever. And that is just a part of the whole wedding mess. I wish I had a car back then, so I could go back home as well, as the wedding was terrible for many other reasons as well. Groom was cheap. Bride was a Karen. When I was at a wedding of my parents' friends, the groom tried to throw a decently sized piece of cake at the bride who moved out of the way. The cake ended up hitting my 76-year-old grandma. We all had a good laugh, but we were all cringing at the same time at the missed cake attempt. This is my dad's story. He went to his friend's daughter's wedding reception. Before coming in, the bride and groom had this whole scene of them looking for each other. The guests watched it on a giant screen inside. I know a guy who recently made his lackeys, sorry friends, compete to be his best man. Most pretentious thing I have ever seen. Watching them grovel was so upsetting to me. The ceremony also was the name reveal. They changed their last name because they didn't want to be stuck to their heritage and didn't want anything to hold them back. Turns out they changed their name thinking they could erase their mountains of debt or at least hide from it. Turns out you can't live under 2 legal identities. Hey, thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe.